Brilliant. Good morning, everybody. We're here with CreateAWorld again. Welcome. For those of you who may be new to us, CreateAWorld is a broadcast. It's way more than just a broadcast that's brought to you by collaborators within the field of Tantra Maat, which is people who are working with principles guiding a cultural collective of wisdom, of bringing together awareness for new futures rising. And when we do these broadcasts, we have different topics, different guests, all of that. And we aren't saying we have the answers. We're exploring wisdom that's usually, a little out past the edge, a little outside the norm, because the stuff in the norm is not working out as well as we hoped, unless it is for you. So we explore what's rising on behalf of all life and on behalf of what has us exist as whole and be expressions of life in direct connection with the greater whole of which we're a part. Today, I'm with Tantra Maat, the founder of the field of Tantra Maat, and we're going to continue a conversation that we started last week with the whole group of the collaborators on fear, regarding fear and different elements, because it's up. We're seeing it in a lot of places, not just because of so many things like the political partisanship and the way the news reports events is very fear-based. The way commercials do things is very fear-based. If you don't buy this product, you'll fail, you'll be left behind, you won't be as good as you can be. There's fear in all the strata of society. And amongst those who are evolving, becoming more awake and aware, becoming able to leave trauma-based conditionings and realities behind, there's a lot of fear that I don't think many of us expected. So we're going to talk about it from a particular point of view, and I'm going to turn it over to Tantra now to get started.
I am glad to be here. I have been, it's an interesting day for me because I'm very, over the last 4 or 5 days, I've been very traumatized and experiencing a lot of fear. And been fascinated by the interactive relationship of when someone's afraid with other people. And also how I remember also when I was diagnosed with terminal cancer, it was very interesting to watch how people tried to interact with me. Mm-hmm. Like there was a whole missing world. And I've been working with a group of people, Deb among them, in using the creation templates, literally to rematrix the reality within which money occurs. So I don't think it's any accident that the timing of a financial challenge, well, actually more of a service challenge, someone did not fix my RDB $20,000 later. was just a little traumatizing, and to have no apparent reciprocity or way to have it sort out really landed me in the face of what is this thing called fear. And I really was excited because it turned out that who we're going to have today couldn't come on. And I said today, I said, Deb, I just want to be in the raw feed of it. Let's just,
Mhm.
let me just wing it. I think what happens when you have some level of public face, there's this feeling that you have it handled. And I don't have it handled. The one thing I have on my side is a collective cultural wisdom community
Yeah.
that seeks to use every event to increase the capacity for being wise, actually. Not wise like manipulative or problem solving, but wise like using everything to get to the deeper nature of things. Because at the deeper nature of things, there's a peace.
And to live more connected to life existing as whole.
Yeah, and to live more connected to life as existing in whole.
Mhm.
So, so in a way, I'm winging it, and Deb has more cultural wisdom in the area because it's part of her profession, and because she's the one that raised me almost 20 years ago when I was just learning how to have this gift that moves through me that made me very different than other human beings and very isolated from being human.
Bless
And
you,
now,
Tantra. It was almost 40 years ago.
oh, sorry, 40 years ago, just a couple years off. And yet the joy of being part of a community and the joy of the
Yeah.
strength of community and the joy of being human is really why I'm here today. Having this conversation with Deb, because she and her husband Russ had a huge amount to do with helping me cope with being a human being. Over to you, Deb.
Yeah, I want to pick up on a couple things that really flesh out this topic. You said I've had several things happen that I was really traumatized by. In the official mainstream field of psychology, that where diagnoses are prevalent and are essential in that arena, to talk about trauma or traumatic stress means something that's literally life-threatening. There's been a change. A different edition of the Diagnostic Statistic Manual used to include psychic threat. Now it's been taken out, which is a mistake, but there you have it.
Wow.
And so it's only
They clearly never met my mother.
Yeah, right. It's not possible. But at the same time, they're trying to include like relational trauma and harm to children. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACE, is a big topic now, but you can't actually separate it out if you're going to engage even in the official definition of traumatic stress. So I'm not diminishing what Tantra said. I'm using it to point out exactly what she's saying. So there's a lot of people who do use the word, oh, I was so traumatized, whatever, in a kind of a, what's the word I want to use? Like a
Socially correct way.
Yeah, it's very social. It's very common. It's not, but at the same time, they're pointing to something. The subtlety of harm in a communication, in a like what Tantra's talking about, that's pretty serious. To have somebody continually say they have done something, charge you more money, but then she was telling me a lot of the stories around it. And it was not only that they didn't do what they said, that's more overt. You can hold on to that. But then there are the subtle things where they talked down to her. She couldn't possibly know what she was talking about. She couldn't possibly be contributing to the solution. It was very subtle in their communication. And this occurs in prejudice and racism too, what gets called microaggressions. And it is harm. It is harm. It leaves, and we have gotten, in our modern Western culture, fortunately, there's a lot of people who won't back down and won't say, oh no, that's okay. That's happening more and more in the areas of, like I said, racism and prejudice, where they're saying, this isn't working. And they're holding their ground. But there are also a lot of people who
are shooting a store manager because she has a gay pride flag in a window. So part of the reason for this conversation, we deal in field phenomenon in the field of Tantra Maat, which I know makes it difficult sometimes to listen because we're used to listening in problem solving or solutions or explanations. But the reason we started CreateAWorld was because we're part of a global community that is coherent. In other words, operates on behalf of life and what has us exist as whole. So we're really drawing from the collective consciousness to have this conversation like a ripple effect. Our intent today is to produce ripple effect, not a ripple effect of solving a problem, but the ripple effect of awareness. And just, Deb, if I may, what really got me about it, because it looked fixed, and then I had it towed home because I didn't have it licensed or registered or insurance on it. And I come out and the towing guy says, for some reason, the RV won't turn on, which was exactly what had been wrong that I took it in with. I mean, you couldn't turn on the truck. It's a road track simplicity. And I just stood there, and every bit of the difficulty from June 22 swept over me like when a window blows out and all the shards slam into your body. But the other piece of it was I was so shocked at how shocked I was. I was stunned by the trauma reaction within my own system. And in that split second, because we've been in a lot of conversations, that's what global communities do. In a split second, I went, oh my God, what I could once tolerate, my system can't tolerate anymore. And just to tag off what Deb was saying, and I didn't know how to deal with that. I had learned to, in my case, I'm fierce. And when I'm mad, I can come at somebody terrifyingly. I also got that from my mother. But that was not what I was to do. I mean, all this happened in a split second.
Yeah.
And then I know that when I was I was very mean when I was in my 20s, very mean, a reaction to being abused. And I really loved revenge. I loved it. So all of a sudden in that split second, I didn't have two tools, rage and revenge. They were gone. They were gone. And I have felt helpless in my life, as we all have. And this is what I wanted to present to you, Deb. But this was a different kind of helpless. This was different. This was helpless, like I'd forgotten a tool, like I'd forgotten a way to be that lets me be in the face of those that aren't interested in being in relationship with another human being. And it really is the difference between we're objects. I'm an old lady, and so I have no voice, and I'm not a mechanic, therefore I have no voice. So there is that part. Yeah, there is that, but there's the other part about something had been something had been passing through the human system for so long that I realized I'd adapted to it.
And it was this is why what you just described, in my view, is exactly why the psychic part of the traumatic stress should not have been removed. Because the adaptation the trauma armoring of rage and revenge is gone. It's like someone who is having to learn to walk again and has no idea how to access the tools or a different part of their brain or anything. It's a psychic hole. And even though you stand for light,
Deb, explain from your point of view what you mean by a psychic hole. And kind of layman's,
H-O-L-E.
no, hole, I get the psychic part I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. So the psyche is not just like, when I say the psychic part of traumatic stress, I don't mean, we've gotten used to the term psychic, like you go see a psychic. Yeah. The psyche is your energetic system, your spirit, your mind, the invisible aspects of being, not the physical or corporeal parts that are easy to objectify, but the minute you lose part of that corporeal part, you're really present to how much of the psyche aspects of being are essential in restoration.
And it's also, just to add to that, it's the part of us that has us feeling spirited, tender, caring, loving, in touch, beautiful, sweet. It's not in the objectification of the mental mind. It's a sensation of the joy or sensitivity of being alive, joy and sensitivity of being alive. And when that part gets impacted, which is what I noticed, thank you, Deb, for explaining that, because it's the words I didn't have. What actually terrified me wasn't the event. What terrified me was all of a sudden there was a psychic hole, and my capacity to be in touch with life, my capacity to feel belonging to my own existence. I think I said that well.
You did say that well. And I do have an agenda, just so everybody knows. I've got an agenda for this call around discussing fear. So we're getting there because it's really up, severely up in society. So the other side, and I've been so present to so many things, being that razor's edge of front of the hand, back of the hand. So in addition to what Tantra said, she's now present to something of the preciousness of her connection to life. So the kinds of words coming at her and the actions are in opposition to that beautiful, gentle, or not always gentle, but that beautiful,
vibrant.
Yes, thank you. Connection to life, experience of life, of sacredness even. And that's true for all of us. We all have that. So when our trauma armoring leaves, that is so raw, we hardly ever know how to deal with it. It's true for, well, I'm trying to think of an example, so I'll just use mine. So I'm engaged in restructuring myself financially and rebuilding a matrix of financial interaction, financial prosperity. But it's not woo-woo. It's not just, oh, let me have some new thought forms around it. And sorry if that came out snarky. It's so all my armoring around that, which may have been, for me, patterns of poverty and poverty consciousness, they're gone. And I'm in the, like, I feel like a walking embryo in this area, having to totally relearn, and it's very tender. And anything that's not that that's just very common in the culture. No harm intended, because I do want to get to intent versus impact here. Very common. And I feel like you have no idea what you just said. That hurt me. I don't feel safe. I don't know how to navigate now because I'm not in the world. I'm in the world, not of it. So there's a lot of what Tantra is describing that's that also. And
We have another audience. The two squirrels are sitting up listening. I just thought
oh, how special. Yay.
the two squirrels and the dog are listening. So we
That's
don't know.
fabulous.
For those of you on YouTube, I can't get to YouTube on my screen for some reason. So if you're commenting, please comment and share with each other because I can't get it on my screen for some reason today.
So I'm going to read from Tantra. You're doing great at jumping in if you've got to add or if I'm talking too much. So
You're not.
There's a couple things. Tantra wrote a what is it, journal entry, a blog?
Journal entry.
The other day, and I can't find the part about intent versus impact that I wanted. But here is a good summary. I noticed I'm living the feelings that are there for all of us as our systems fail and do not take human beings into consideration. That is what's happening. So intent versus impact and fear is rampant are the two things that are my agenda for today. And what Tantra is illuminating it very, very, very well. So each of you can imagine or, remember, think of your own instances where you feel very destabilized, don't necessarily know how to go forward, can't go back, and the trauma armoring is probably gone, or you're rushing for new ones. But even here, let's see, how do I do this? In the modern Western culture, fear is kind of part of the water we swim in. And I named several examples in the beginning of the call. The thing is, even amongst those of us who think we are evolved, and maybe we are, and compared to something else, maybe we're not. But we all know about fear that's useful. Don't step out in front of the bus. Trust the intuition that says a car's coming. We all know about that, or even less dramatic examples. That's good fear. That's useful. The kind of fear that takes us over, like in what Tantra's talking about, or your own examples, money issues is a great one. Fear and worry are deeply embedded in our knowing of ourselves and our sensibilities, and it's dangerous. It's actually dangerous. It actually keeps you separate from solutions, from each other, and is physically harmful. There's millions of studies that say, well, sorry, not millions, but quite a huge number that talk about the stress, the impact on the body, never mind the spirit and the mind, but on the body, the impact on the body of stressors, including fear and worry. It's dramatic. So to have some comprehension and find patterns that let you get from where you are. I wanted to read the part that I can't seem to find. Tantra, I'm aggravated that I can't find it.
Why don't you look while I make an example, okay?
All right, yeah.
So one of the things I learned living at Tintagel with Russ and Deb, we had shared families, was I learned as I began to cope with being human, I learned that my environment had to be safe, not the human environment, but the feel of my environment. So as you see, I have a dragon behind me. That's Esme. To my left is her daughter, Yolinda. And to my right is her son, Oshin. and there's my apricot tree behind me, and in front of me is my daughter's dog. But what happened was I closed in to tunnel vision. But I'm practiced in that because I'm an empath. So I'm practiced in being hyperstimulated. So I just close down and I come out and wrap my arms around Esme and put my face on her metal, cold or hot metal body. Kevin sleeps right up against me. I go get a chai and I just stop letting my mind ramble. I just take care of being connected to things that are precious to me and who I feel precious with. My sense is that we're in this beautiful collective meta point, which is one reason Deb and I are having this conversation, where there is a spiral of beingness that is both individual and collective. What Deb has been addressing, did you find it?
No, I found parts of what I want, but I didn't find the other.
What Deb and I are addressing is we're noticing that we're all used to coping with this at an individual level, but in our fragile, maybe not so put together yet well way, but we will get it down eventually, and we're going to keep talking this till we have some ability to be flexible in our heart and in our sensitivities. But this phenomenon of it is our suspicion that now we're having a collective empathic response as well as our own individual collective response. So while we were used to isolating ourselves and feeling fine separate from the others, there's no isolating ourselves to feel fine without the others.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Deb?
Yeah. The one I really wanted, how you wrote up being the phrase we've used twice here, intent versus impact. The way you described it was really lovely, and I can't find it. I know it was in that article I printed out, but so that's part of I think the first is because I'm really solution focused here. It's quite dangerous to be in states of fear. You get separated from yourself and others. You get separated from your capacity to think and see your way through. And I'm not talking about situations that are overwhelming and horrific. I'm talking.
Yeah, I think I found it. Can I read it?
Oh, good. In a minute.
Okay, but it's the definition, right? Is that what you're looking for? Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
I'm ready.
thank you.
I'm ready when you are.
So here's one phrase. I'm just going to use her article. We're all feeling this intense need, or a intense need to protect ourselves against harm. So our awareness of harm for many people now we've become hyper aware, hypersensitive. And that's pretty normal. Like when you step from a dark room into the light of the corridor or something, and your eyes blink, 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 you're hypersensitive to the light for a few minutes. We're kind of in that. And it really requires some kind of practice, discipline, structure, something to grab onto to maybe feel what you're feeling and identify its impact on you, but not let it rule you. That's essential. And here's the other one. This is Tantra speaking. I prefer to discover the source of fear and dismantle it into life force energy. That's what I was just saying. Rather than be at the effect of the fear. It costs me the joy of my day and of life, and I'll not have that. Well, I happen to agree totally. But I find that essential. That's not just a lovely position. I think that's essential. Absolutely essential. And without that capacity, however that would look for you, without that capacity to dismantle the fear into life force energy. And that's not the same as ignore it or, like it doesn't exist or any of those kinds of ways of being. I prefer to discover the source of fear and dismantle it into life force energy rather than be at the effect of the fear. It costs me the joy of my day and of life, and I'll not have that. That's essential. Absolutely essential. So now, intent versus impact, Tantra, please.
Yeah, I want to comment before I say that to read it, is that it isn't a philosophical discussion today.
Exactly.
As a seer, I had a God visit, or I thought he was God, in 1994, about now, right now. And his parting words to me, because he showed me these events that started a while back. The fifth event is there were 5 events. 4 of the 5 events have occurred. But there's now evidence that the 5th event is about to occur. But his direction to me, his orders actually to me, was have them not be afraid. So there's real meat in this gentle way, maybe even not so gentle way Deb and I are approaching this, because our intent is to end up with a collective group of human beings, not that we have to know each other, but a collective group of beings that can dismantle the fear phenomenon to the point that we are not frozen in fear as our world changes, collapses, and destabilizes more and more, a world we've counted on. That's one thing. The other thing is that we have many, many human beings, especially my age group, which is 77. Our value was our role in society, our monetary wealth, our education, a little bit later on, what kind of job we had. So there wasn't much developed in my age group, and I think Deb's too. There wasn't much developed about just enjoying your life. You really had to have purpose and meaning and function, particularly function. And you had to look right in the societal eye. So I'm talking to people from, 15 years old to 90 or 100 here, because it's a ripple effect through all of us. And if you haven't noticed in the USA government, the people ruling are my age, and you're watching human beings that learn to not have emotions. So it's kind of a weird deal right now. So here's the definition. Intent is the purpose behind an action or statement, the why behind what someone does. Impact is the result. It is how the person on the receiving end of those words or actions interprets or feels. It's how the person on the receiving end of those words or action interprets or feels about what they just encountered, and are at the effect of the experience in a positive or negative way.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
Yes, it's brilliantly stated. I encountered that phrase or got exposed to it when the organization I worked for had this absolutely brilliant 8-week workshop, and it was for white people only, to explore racism and prejudice, and it was hard work. I didn't expect it, but that intent versus impact, and I can give you an example that is really embarrassing, but my intent, I went with whoever I was with to this wonderful flea market probably with my mom and sister out in New Mexico. And it was just out somewhere kind of in the country. The Native Americans were running it, of course, and I came upon this old woman running a booth. To me, she just was one of the most beautiful people I had ever seen. Just incredible. I was really stunned at how beautiful she came across. Her spirit shone through everything. And I had an open mouth insert foot moment. And I said, "You are one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen." And she was horrified. So my intent was good. My impact was horrible. Horrible. I harmed her. So we can have good intentions. And, I'm suspicious of the intentions of the people handling the RV, but the impact is clear, and they're not attending to the impact. So how does that relate to fear? It obviously can activate fear in whomever is impacted. And I don't know how well trained people are in cleaning up, making amends, their communications, their interactions. I don't know about that as a whole phenomenon in our society. I don't think it's something that people have to actively seek, I think, at this juncture. I'm not sure how natural it is or maybe there are pockets of society in which that's a really real thing, I hope. But there's so much where it's not. And that creates not safety. That's impactful. It creates not safety. It creates fear, a fear of each other and fear of our ability to navigate situations. So that's part of why it's connected for me. Plus, it was an important part of Tantra's example. Anything for you about what I just said, Tantra?
Sorry, we have a guard dog, so you get to watch him guarding. I don't think he even knows what he's guarding, but he is at this juncture. Yes, there are a few things I want to say. I think the part that one of the things in the cultural wisdom community we are a part of is there's a very specific learning capability that we strive for: vulnerability, transparency, authenticity, intimacy, and affinity. It doesn't mean that you're required to have them to belong, but it does mean that there's something that becomes available when you're open to practice those things with each other. And one of the things that happens is the harm doesn't have a
place to live.
But it actually doesn't, it's still there, but I need your help with this. It's just like a child. If a child can be held when the boy next door slugged him in the eye, it reduces the impact of the harm. There's still harm, but you're returned to knowing you're cared for, to knowing you're loved. And there's something so alchemical, so spiritually valuable about someone being able to be returned to knowing they're loved and that they're cared for, and that the impact of the harm didn't mean anything about who they are, that it was just plain harm, independent of reason. It was just plain harm. So that's one thing I want to say. The second thing is that I'm actually a very good communicator. And there are times people think I don't clean things up, but it's usually because you're under my teaching structure, my moving with me as a seer in a mystic structure, and my job is to make sure you're able. And sometimes that can look, you can be mad at me about that. Let's just put that simply. But I trust the madness because it'll keep a person's attention on something. And my job isn't about their relationship with me. My job is that they get to fulfill on who they came here to be. But in my intimate relationships, like my close friends, we work hard to make sure we're okay with each other because of that day. Not just, I shouldn't say because, but there is a because, even if we don't mean it to be, because that day that we are shocked or hurt or frightened, we need those arms to be able to walk into.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know that we're safe with another in the field, not safe to recover, safe to take time to come back. And in our society, you lose a husband, you have a week, and then you're supposed to start to live again. You know, I lost a child, and I was supposed to then be fully functional within a month or two. And so we don't have neither of those were intentional harm and intent, but the impact was overwhelming. The harm to one's soul, to one's being was overwhelming. So this whole phenomenon of imagine a community or just human beings interested in affinity. Just imagine the difference. What if the service department at the was interested in affinity, was interested in a relationship with me? But that's the key. Not a relationship like friends, a relationship like ears to hear and hearts are open.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I knew about this time. I knew we're going down to the bedrock. It's the hardest time because so many human beings have just been expecting the world to keep going the way it was,
Mm-hmm.
especially a lot of white people and also elite other color people. You know, they live in their glass houses and they don't think they're going to be impacted by the collapse of the social structures. But a friend of mine said to me once from Africa, very similar to what Deb went through, he moved into an area of Africa and built a beautiful home in a beautiful area, and then couldn't figure out why the natives shunned him because he'd built on their sacred land. And he never even apologized for doing it.
Probably never asked.
And he never even knew.
Yeah.
Until all of a sudden he realized that he was being charged more at the market and that people weren't coming out to fix his stuff. And finally he said to his valet, "What's going on here?" And the valet answered, "You are hated." And he didn't even know.
That was quite an act of service from that valet. See, it's interesting how the qualities of vulnerability, affinity, the things Tantra named, from one point of view, being told you're hated, it may not look like an act of service, an act of affinity, maybe not for that specific human being, but for the sacred nature of human being. So that valet saying "you are hated" was quite a gift that gave him the homeowner the ability to make choices. Now, I don't know what he chose. I don't know what he did or whatever, but he now had the ability to make real choices. And that's a piece of I'm going to call them structures of the wisdom culture that a lot of us are involved in, is that it isn't about being lovey-dovey with each other necessarily, unless it is. It's about honoring the, how do I say it? Honoring the real nature of human being, perhaps the original nature, and what every single human being carries within them. Like I've said many times, so have others, when children are harmed, they absolutely know what is healthy and what isn't healthy. They absolutely know. And they may get bent into their own trauma armoring by what they have to go through to survive. But you wouldn't have the trauma responses if you thought harm was normal. It would just be life as usual. In a certain way, we act that way on certain levels and registers of it's become accepted as normal, but every single one of us knows it's not somehow. And there's always a torque in there. And frequently the torque is fear, worry, and so forth. So it's about that
Systemic.
Thank you.
Can I respond a
Please.
little bit? I think we need to confront the systemic nature of harm. And the systemic nature of harm is I feel harmed. Justified, unjustified. I feel harmed. The next step is take care of the emotional health, your emotional well-being, your physical well-being, homeopathy, your spiritual well-being, and your mental well-being. It's very different than than lashing out or even saying you harmed me. So whether it's real or not, I know my path right now, and I'm really pissed at that company. But because I'm pissed, I'm not doing anything, because everything I will do will be against another. And I can't come from there for my own well-being, not to be right or wrong, but for my own well-being. I have to figure out what takes care of me. And what takes care of me is not harming another. And I actually emailed them this article. And the subject I put in there was in service of service, because that I can contribute. I can contribute to them the possibility of intent versus impact, the possibility of being in service another way. I can provide that. And that is not harm.
No,
that is informing. And then I go after homeopathy, because homeopathy is one of the best trauma reducers we've got at hand. And you have to talk to a homeopath about that, not me. But then also my spiritual and emotional well-being, which is having someone to put your head on their shoulders and cry. Not to have them solve your problem, but because it's just too bloody hard sometimes. It's just too hard. And so this is the part I want to lean towards you on, Deb. So this idea of self-care, we could also say it comes under the banner of to thine own self be true, which is not protect and defend against another, but protect and defend the quality of life within yourself. And over to you, Deb.
Yeah. And that's really dicey. Sometimes I find it dicey sometimes, because I sort of kind of like Tantra. I've been discovering how much I relied on protect and defend as a structure, a container. And everybody's different in that regard. But
it's what I have discovered, and it really is about nurturing my way out of it. Not mad at me about it, but nurturing my my way out of it, is it's particularly hard when they really are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is wrong.
Yes.
And ask anybody, they'll be
Yes.
glad they know it's wrong too. And
Yeah.
to turn yourself around and make your priority, I can't handle the wrongdoing until I'm back in touch with myself, is a new paradigm.
Yes.
It is the new culture of here.
Yes.
To mine own self be true, not politically, not morally, but the true, being true to self is making sure the self is nurtured, nourished, cared for, and in touch with the beauty of life.
And as you said, not against another. It's very easy.
Or ourselves.
Or ourselves. Like to not diminish my own self because, oh, they just don't understand, or any of the subtle ways we do that. And for Tantra to send the article that we've been reading from, which is on her website, and if any of you want to read the whole thing, and for her to send that and send, this is what intent versus impact is, that's akin to that ballet saying, because you're hated. And there's no harm, there's no, it's, well, there's against harm, not against them. And the potential for illumination and growth is high, in my optimistic way. And so even the things she was saying about, like, she has her dragon in the background and her beautiful yard, and I have my versions of that here in my home and working on the yard. Those are things that are environmental containers. And Liz is brilliant about talking. Liz is one of our collaborators, and you've seen her on different episodes, broadcasts. She's brilliant at talking about sentient registers, and Victoria too, the things that generate resonance within which we can be held or hold ourselves, knowing how and when to connect with another and say, just hear me, just hold me. I don't want to hear a solution, just hold me. Those, and the more we can articulate what we need from each other, and the more we can respond without our own agenda, that's a social layer of environmental wholeness and generating containers within which we can support each other. That's the next level out, but it really takes something to have someone walk up to you and say, I'm harmed, or you harmed me when you said this, when you did that. And to just be able to say, really get it and hear it and be with it, and not justify it, not say, well, I only this, or I didn't mean that, or you're being too sensitive, or any of the ways we respond, which is protect and defend, that fosters our own agenda. That's going to, the agenda then becomes dissolving harm and fostering capacity. It's slow, it can be sometimes slow, it can be very subtle, it can be very dramatic, everywhere in between. But we're in those places, and to not let fear get us is fear of each other, fear of ourselves, fear of the experience, the feelings, any of that. That's a pretty important dynamic right now, pretty important. And I have, ideas and suggestions, and one of my favorite ways is I watch movies, is training media, training films. So you're gonna have to find your way, talk with others, invent it, create it.
But the key element here is a long time ago, before human beings are who we are today, the race, the species human being was harmed. The race itself, the species itself was harmed. Something or several somethings happened that separated us from what loved us and separated us from our own ability to love ourselves. We wouldn't do that. We're a very young species. So kind of like the beauty is that we only think that harm is human beings. But the truth is that something happened at the spiritual level millennia ago that separated human beings from their sense of connection with the world around them. So it's a very simple, I was hoping I'd beat the sun, but the sun's going to be right in my face in about 3 minutes. But so it's a very simple solution, not necessarily easily undertaken.
Exactly.
And that is, if we can start realizing the value of recovering from the feeling or the experience of harm, it doesn't matter where it came from. It means that we can recover a self that can't be harmed, like Daniel in the lion's den. I'm pretty sure that the Romans are pretty excited about the lions eating him. But for Daniel, he just didn't have any interest. He didn't have any fear of harm. And therefore, the lions weren't that interested in eating him. And I'm aware of the vast gap that we're in regarding this topic. But I think what Deb is saying and what I'm saying is I still think we should take the trip.
Yeah.
I still think we should attempt the journey. Any final words?
Yeah, I'm going to be a little blunter than that.
That's why she's my mother.
The journey is upon us.
Yes.
It has to be taken. And I see two general ways. The path of what Tantra just described. And that's the path of discovering the source of the fear and dismantling it into life force energy. And the other is the path of you will be run by fear and consumed by it. And, both of them are evolutionary paths. Both of them are, evolutionary paths.
One is more devolutionary, however.
Correct. I'm trying to be a little bit nice.
Yeah, you don't
fully
have
blunt
to.
in my full style.
There was something you just said I want to complete with. Hold on.
While you're thinking, the individual part and the social part are equally important.
Yes.
More important at different times. They'll have different weights at different times.
Yeah, I know a lot of us are withdrawing right now. I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. Withdrawing and regathering yourself and getting your bits back together is a very good thing, because the beginning of this conversation was we would only be losing our trauma armoring if there wasn't an evolutionary new frontier of existence ahead of us. The human body is a smart thing. It keeps trauma armoring when needed, and it sheds it when no longer needed. And we are in the in-between of that, where we have a real chance to go back into our experience of harm, being harmed, and recover ourselves in whatever way works. I got a response back from somebody this morning, and I burst out laughing, which surprised me, because I was talking about the impact of something that had happened that they were part of when I was younger. And they responded actually in being the impact of harm. And yet I could laugh, not because of anything but love for them. I could laugh because it was clear that's what it was. And there's nothing I need to do about that. I just need to know that's not a place I can go. It's not a place for me to go to sort things out, because there's something that can't be seen. And for a lot of us, we think the other person needs to see and the other person needs to know. And the odds are pretty good during this time. Maybe not, but we can. And that's what's most important. Okay, my beloved, we're off and running as the
All
sun
right.
hits my face. Take precious care.
All right.